of these Zoom meetings. So these weekly meetings are organized by FTV5 and La Diaspora Camerounese. FTV5 is a non-profit video production organization with a social focus, and La Diaspora Camerounese is our biggest platform where we connect Africans home and abroad for both to be able to participate in their nation's building. So these weekly meetings are part of our mission to sensitize Africans on a variety of issues, variety of topics. That's why you see we have guest speakers, variety of guest speakers who will talk to you on different topics like we have been doing in the past few weeks. Today we have as guest speaker, Debbie Luis, and originally we had two of them today, but due to some unforeseen circumstances, one will not be joining us. So we are honored with the presence of Debbie Luis, who is a high school teacher. He's going to be talking to us about the education system in Africa and what we can do to ameliorate it. What can we do to stop people from moving from Africa to study abroad, whereas we have all it takes to have quality education here in Africa. So I will just call him up and he will tell us more about himself. After that, he will dive right into our topic of discussion for today. So, Debbie Luis, good evening. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Can you get me well?
Very well.
Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Good evening to everyone. And thanks so much for making it up tonight when we'll be talking education. Indeed, education is life. Education is everything we need for our growth, for our development, for our advancement, amongst others. So discussing education is really a very, very important subject. Tonight, my presentation is very brief. It's interactive, and inputs are welcome from any participant on board. As well, if you have a question at any point in time, freely indicate, and I'll be happy to listen to you too. My presentation will present some definition of key terms or key concepts related to education. We shall discuss the forms of education that exist in Cameroon, and of course, we shall discuss the historic evolution of education in the Cameroonian context. We shall as well discuss about the two subsystems of education in Cameroon. We will discuss about the challenges of the evolution of education in Cameroon, and of course, on the successes of education in the Cameroonian context, the failures, and the way forward.
All right. Right on, Louis. Okay,
thank you very much. To begin, what actually is education? Education is a strategy. It's a set of instruments put together to educate the given people. And education is different from schooling. Schooling itself is a form of education. However, education itself means a lot. Any process that has to do with cognitive absorption of knowledge, be it within a class setting, through community sensitization, on radio, on media, through personal research, amongst others, can be referred to as education. However, schooling itself is a formal way of educating ourselves. I wanted to make that clear difference. As when we talk about an educational system, it is a group of institutions having authorities, schools, universities, mini systems that are well organized, structured, and have as main objective to provide learning or education for learners. So in the Cameroonian context, we have different forms of education. We have formal education, which is being provided by three ministries in Cameroon, basically. That's the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Civic Education, the Ministry of Basic Education, sorry, the Ministry of Secondary Education, and the Ministry of Higher Education. We have informal education, which is the process of absorbing knowledge or getting knowledge, maybe through skills, through professional training, following a formal curriculum, but not inside a classroom. And in Cameroon, we have three ministries that work on this space. We have the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Civic Education. We have the Ministry of Sports and Physical Education. And then we have the Ministry of Vocational Training, headed by Minister Issa Chiruma Bakari for the moment. And then we have a third form of education, non-formal education. Non-formal education is different in the sense that it does not have a curriculum, it does not have a clear structure. However, learners or participants or students learn in the process. What we get on radio, on television, on media in general, what we get from our parents, for instance, through storytelling in church, that is non-formal education, yet we learn in the process, right? That said, Cameroon is a very, very unique country, very beautiful, referred to as Africa's in miniature. Cameroon has an educational system for the moment that has gone through different processes and had different objectives at different points in time. We started with pre-colonial education. Pre-colonial education was before 1884, that's before the annexation of Cameroon by the Germans. And then the main objective was just to pass on skills and cultural values from one generation to another. And oral history and oral education was more of the basic strategy. Skills like fishing, hunting, maybe wrestling, amongst others, weaving, were basics of education that was being transferred from one generation to another at the time. After we had the colonial education, that's from 1884 downwards to 1945, right, even 1960. And colonial education itself had as main objective to one, train indigenes, those are Cameroonians, in quotes, who will be able to implement the rule and the decision or the vision of colonial masters at the time. So they were teaching them basic skills in reading, in writing, how to calculate, and maybe how to run errands. Basically, that was the objective of education at the time. And we realized that it was really effective and good, both under German Cameroon, under French Cameroon, under British Cameroon, amongst others. They had values and a lot that we cannot discuss within just minutes. Then we had post-colonial education. Post-colonial education refers to the one above 1960 and 1961 for British Southern Cameroon. That's the English-speaking part of Cameroon. We, at this point in time, we're trying to put together two subsystems of education. The English subsystem of education received from Britain, and the French subsystem of education received from France. It was basically a challenging factor given the aspects of diversity, the difference in approach, the difference in syllabus, amongst others. However, a lot of efforts have been made by government to maybe harmonize and put together the current educational system Cameroon is expecting. And the main objective of post-colonial education was then to train Cameroonians to be able to self-govern themselves. Basically, from the 1960s, they were training our seniors or the elderly ones now to be able to assume posts of responsibility and be able to govern themselves. That self-governance, self-leadership, that was the main focus. It was so until they knew this government came in place after 1982, education was reshaped again, and the objective of education was again reshaped in 1988, when the objective of the higher education was approved by presidential decree. And the objective was to train Cameroonians to be professional, to be morally upright, and to be self-reliant. That's to be able to put into practice some of the knowledge and skills they are acquiring from state universities. And then we have the 1998 law laying the legal framework on the objective of education in Cameroon, which drew inspiration from the All Anglophone Conference 1 and 2, that's in 1993 and 1994. And as main objective, the educational system from 1998 in Cameroon was to train Cameroonians to be deeply rooted in their culture, to promote diversity, that we should be united in diversity, to promote professionalism, and of course to promote sports and physical education. If you have time, you could read the 1998 law laying the legal framework orientating education in Cameroon to get more insight on that. And then we as well had two subsystems of education till date. And there are a lot of challenges that these subsystems of education have been facing, that I would like to share some of these challenges. The first is at the level of harmonization. We adopted two subsystems of education that normally needs to go through a process to be good enough for Cameroonians. And given the fact that Cameroon at the time was preaching unity, was preaching progress, amongst others, the ministers and stakeholders in the educational sector saw the need to harmonize the system of education. Many efforts were made by government and ministers that I will share some. Harmonization was being made at two levels, at the structural level and at the level of the content. At the level of the structure, a lot of successes were achieved, some of which include the duration of the academic year was harmonized both for the French and subsystems of education. We have 3 equal terms for both systems. At level of primary education, in the English subsystem, we were expecting 7 years of primary education, while in the French subsystem, they were observing 5 years. So they successfully harmonized it to 6 years, and they made entrée and sixième au first school living certificate mandatory, all at level of the 6th year for you to go to secondary school. At level of the secondary school, efforts were made but not fully succeeded. We have the length of secondary education remaining 7 years in the two subsystems of education. We have 4 years of secondary education in the French subsystem and 3 years of high school education. While in the English subsystem, we have 5 years from 1 to 5, and then 2 years of high school education. And then certification, very little successes have been made in that strive, since the certificates we earn remain different in name till today. But at level of higher education, harmonization at level of the structure was really smooth. You are free to answer questions in your first languages in the university. The duration to have a degree is same, master's degree same, amongst others. So a lot of work is still being done at level of secondary education as far as structural harmonization is concerned. Now, at level of content, a common board to examine textbooks for all the subsystems of education was made, whereby most textbooks being used in the English subsystems are simply translated. That's why we are facing some difficulties as well as far as understanding some stuffs in these textbooks are concerned. We also observe that efforts were made in terms of harmonizing the history, for instance, Cameroon history in both subsystems of education, with certain parts of our history completely sidelined. We also had many other aspects of the curriculum itself harmonized, both for the French and English subsystems of education. However, certification remains different, as we have BAPC, probatoire, baccalaureate in the French subsystem of education, and we have BCE, ordinary and advanced level in the English subsystem of education. And then for the technical aspect of education in Cameroon, technical education goes with CAP, probatoire and baccalaureate, while in the English subsystem, in the technical still, they're talking about an English way of certification now. They just changed it last year. Well, to move on, harmonization caused a lot of problems, I must say, because activists from the both subsystems, be it from English Cameroon or French Cameroon, resisted a lot of reforms that were being proposed by stakeholders because they wanted to preserve the cultural heritage they received both from Britain and from France. So mixing it up or harmonizing it was a form of adulterating it, which could lead to loss of identity, could lead to aspects of a lot. I may not be comfortable to share some of them here, but at least we can understand for ourselves. Then the next challenge the educational system faced in Cameroon had to do with bilingualism. Efforts to make education itself bilingual has been really challenging, since the main objective of bilingualism in the Cameroonian context was such that we could live harmoniously together, such that I could understand someone speaking French and the person speaking French could understand me responding in English. That was the basic concept of bilingualism. However, the world itself perceives bilingualism as your ability to officially speak, write, and understand more than 2 official languages. So this concept at the level of our national context and the global context had some conflicting views, and efforts to ensure that Cameroonians become bilingual have been made by government, I must confess, but it has also met a lot of resistance. At the level of the educational system, the language itself was made compulsory in the both subsystems. English and French were made compulsory subjects for you to get admission into maybe university, state universities at the time. Special education for bilingual teachers and special bilingual programs were organized in both subsystems of education. A lot of schools were made bilingual, government bilingual high schools and government bilingual technical high schools were created, amongst others. Yet, bilingualism still remains a sham in the Cameroonian context, and a lot still needs to be done to make this a reality. We also have as third main difficulty the educational system has faced in Cameroon, the Anglophone crisis, which we all know have caused over 800,000 children in the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon to stay out of school for close to 5 years plus. Today, we have had structural violence that led to the death of a lot of learners, a lot of teachers, and scared away many potential curriculum developers, teachers, administrators from these regions. So it has really affected the educational system in Cameroon. As well, the advent of COVID-19 in the year 2020 in Cameroon caused a lot of challenges, as education was suspended at some point in time, and then digital learning was introduced at a time when access to the internet itself is a challenge, access to basic media devices through which you could learn remains challenging. And so it's an ongoing process that still needs a lot of development. As well, the OTS of recent strike action, a movement that was out to work on the dignity and the decent payment of teachers in Cameroon, also caused a lot of challenges in the ongoing 2021-2022 academic year. We observed that learning for close to 2 months was suspended entirely. We observed that teachers at the time were advocating for their rights, of course, since they wanted their advancement decisions, their integration decisions, the improvement in salaries, and of course, the special status for teachers to be signed. Maybe I use the opportunity to explain what is a special status. It is a law that was to protect teachers the more, improve on their payment, make sure all their allowances are being paid, and it could double their salaries. Currently, a secondary high school teacher in Cameroon is on about 230,000. But if the special status was in place, insurance scheme, research allowances, risk allowances, amongst others, could be added to their salary, and it could go up to 400,000 plus. You can understand the difference. And as we speak, teachers in Cameroon remain the least paid within the Central and West African sub-regions in Africa. Cameroon, which remains the breadbasket of the Central African sub-region, pays the least. Even Chad pays more than Cameroon. You can understand the comparative analogy to see that teachers in Cameroon were basing on that to advocate for their rights. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the objective of education in Cameroon for the moment. Cameroon wants to train learners to promote bilingualism, learning of 2 official languages, to promote unity in diversity. That means despite our differences in culture, in ethnicity, in skin color, in location view from the north, west, south, and east, we should be able to meet somewhere, discuss together, and find a common ground despite our differences. It has to do with promoting aspects of professionalism. And professionalism is about promoting entrepreneurship and the art of you learning a trade of your own while in school and being able to employ yourself and employ others after school than depending on the state. That's actually the objective of education. That said, promotion of sport and physical education cannot be overemphasized, since football, for example, is almost considered a religion in Cameroon. About successes of the educational system in Cameroon, Cameroon has done great things in the space of education. We are one of the first African countries to sign a decree that promotes the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that promoted the Millennium Development Goals, and today the Sustainable Development Goal number 4 on universal access to primary education. Public primary education in Cameroon remains free, and to a greater extent, all of education in Cameroon is free for public schools, given the fact that at level of secondary schools, just registration fee is given 7,500 and maybe a PTA, which has nothing to do with the state. At level of the university, you give a token of 50,000, that is $100, and you are given back the same amount the following year in the form of presidential award. So education in Cameroon remains free. We must appreciate the state or the providers for their efforts in that direction. We also have the structure of education, which is really organized and well decentralized in the Cameroonian context. We have over 6 ministries in charge of formal education and many other ministries in charge of informal education. When I talk of 6 ministries here, I'm talking about primary, Ministry of Primary Education, secondary, higher education, youth affairs and civic education. We have vocational training, and of course, we have sports and physical education. It's not structured that way in other countries. And so their structure promotes decentralization and, in a summary, more access to education. Cameroon as well has made a lot of effort in advancing or promoting the virtue of civic education itself, be it formally or informally. That I must confess, and efforts in promoting digitalization in education now is on the move, amongst many others. But then, despite all these successes, we'd like to now ask ourselves if education in Cameroon is relevant for the future. Before I go into this, has anybody any question? If there's any question, I'd like to intervene before I get into the next phase.
Yes, good evening, Luis. Thank you for the presentation. I don't really have a question, but I want to make a comment. I want to make a few comments. Okay. Truly, Cameroon has very good laws as far as education is concerned. But at the level of implementing those laws, that's where there are a lot of lapses. In most rural areas, there are schools that the government have been created, but a school will have just one trained teacher. So how do you expect the person in the rural area, the pupil or the student in the rural area, to study and compete at the same platform with those in the city? There will always be that imbalance, and the person in the rural area will be frustrated when it comes to comparing him at the same platform with the person in the cities. Then I also see something in Cameroon. There is a lot of tribalism in Cameroon. When a minister is appointed, it's as if his ethnic group has been given that ministry. That is what I have observed. I don't know whether somebody can prove me right or wrong. Thank you. Those are the few comments that I have.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comment or question?
Okay, it seems like there are none.
Okay, that's it. Let's go into the actual.
I would love to add something.
Reason why we are here. Yes.
I would love to add something.
Okay.
It's really true that Cameroon has a very great education system, but there are still a lot of people who are unable to acquire this knowledge. For instance, you said education in Cameroon is practically made free. Well, that's how the law states it. But in reality, is it really practice? Is that what we really see on the field? That's the question. Because if that's the case, I don't think there are children in rural areas who won't be able to afford this education that you just said. In quotes, I really quote it. You said it's free. So I don't think it's actually free as in free. Yeah, the state actually put it like education should be free, but in practice, is it really free? So it rolls back to what Mr. Henry was saying a while ago. A lot of tribalism, a lot of corruption. I don't just know how to put it, but that's the way I see
it. Okay, thank you very much. Let me go into critical thinking now.
Okay.
Is the educational system in Cameroon relevant? Is it necessary? Is it important? I will give my answer, then I explain. The entire educational system in Cameroon is a sham. It is have you ever like put on your dress, not because you want to clothe your nakedness, but because you just wanted to be present in a party? That's actually what we have in Cameroon as education. I will explain why. First of all, we do not have our own curriculum. What we have in Cameroon as a curriculum is what we adopted from France and from Britain. So we have failed to draw our own curriculum for over 60 years plus after independence, which is really a problem of its own. We are using the educational system France abolished in the 1960s. Same for Britain. And we are killing ourselves and fighting to protect this system that did not even work for them, and they changed it. That's what we are fighting for today. And I'll explain the context of what I mean. I really do apologize if I'm hurting someone through this personal comment. Education itself is guided by a curriculum, and curriculum is being developed regularly based on context. Before developing a curriculum, you take many factors into consideration. First, the kind of citizen you want. Two, the abilities and skills you want them to possess. Three, the problems or the challenges of the future and how they can overcome it. Because education is to guarantee or secure the future. It's not for the present. Those of the present are benefiting from education of the past. Now, in the context of our educational system in Cameroon, it was largely revised. In fact, that was not even revision, 2008. It was not revision, it was just drinking over tea and reviewing one and the same thing or recycling one and the same curriculum. A good curriculum needs to go through a broad-based study such that even a common man, even a 2-year-old baby on the streets can propose how he or she wants his education to look like. And then it is now organized into a national educational forum where experts will analyze all the data received from the field, and then it is sent to Parliament for voting, where scrutiny takes place. It is forwarded to the presidency, where it's enacted into law. Then it is practiced practically. Now, what are some of the aspects that makes our education irrelevant? The first is that our educational system has not previewed any problem that Cameroon will face, let's say in 5 years, maybe in 10 years, maybe in 20 years. Maybe Cameroon wants to emerge. What are the challenges? What are the lackings in the economy? Such that they could fit in those elements into the educational system. That's the first. No study like that has been conducted. Two, all the successes of education that a government stakeholder or whosoever will advance is failing. If we talk about civic education, we have more vandalized youths within school and out of school today within the Cameroonian context. If we talk about peace in the past, and we're happy that Cameroon was peaceful, we have the most violent youth across the African continent for the moment. If we're to talk about professionalism, we have the highest rate of unemployment within the Central African sub-region. So, someone's mic is on. Could you switch it off? Consider as I was saying, our educational system has a lot of reforms that needs to be effected for it to become more and more relevant. We lack aspects of critical thinking. first. Secondly, we lack elements of peace education in our curriculum. We intentionally removed these two aspects when we were adopting the systems of education from France and from Britain, because they were Sorry, can you get me?
Yes, I can get you.
Okay, thank you. Our administrators at the time felt like talking about peace, talking about critical thinking is irrelevant. At the level of critical thinking, it's about challenging the status quo. And the government in place did not want the Cameroonian youth to think critically about everything and to be able to bring in innovation that could challenge even their mandate in power. That was the main challenge they had. So they script out that aspect of our curriculum, which still affects our development, our growth, our democracy, our legal systems, amongst others till today. We as well waste a lot of time in Cameroon. The educational system permits us to study many irrelevant things. For example, you want to become a medical doctor. In the Cameroonian context, you are expected to study every subject in primary school, everything in secondary school, apart from even your main core subjects. Then you are given a few years in the university to specialize. And while specializing, you are still studying a lot of irrelevant content. So you spend more than half of your years on earth virtually studying what will hardly help you. I just quote the example of a medical doctor. Maybe I quote the example of an engineering student. You go to Form 1, you're expected to study history, citizenship, geography, many other things. The history you are studying is about ACI. The history you are studying is about the First World War. It's about maybe what happened in pre-colonial Cameroon. It has nothing to do with your immediate past, and you have no link directly to that history, so it's irrelevant. The geography you are studying is not even how the Northwest or the Southwest is. What is present there? What is our riches? How can we develop it? We are learning how maybe, I mean, a lot of irrelevant things. The Green Revolution. You are learning about snow in Europe, snow that you may never see. You are learning a lot of stuff that at the end of the day does not help you. So there is a lot of content that has been placed at the disposal of learners that is not relevant for them. And there is the need for us to think about that too. We promote a lot of discrimination in education in Cameroon. I would not like to expatiate more on that because our brother spoke about it. Aspects of gender role is promoted a lot within the educational system too, which is a form of violence against women. We subjugate women to maybe, or we orientate them towards jobs related to their gender, care, nurses, primary school teachers. I mean, which is not what is supposed to exist. So they are failing to contribute their quota in nation building, which is a great challenge. We, as Cameroonians, live within the world, and the world is facing a disaster, climate change, which will keep affecting Earth for the next centuries. Very little is said about climate change and how we can tackle these effects in our current day curriculum, which is a blunder. So we are not trying to solve immediate problems of the future. We are looking history of the past that has very little to do with our future. That's one of the challenges of education. Then in a summary, we do not promote critical thinking. We do not promote digital literacy. In our education, we learn very little about phones, about how to use a laptop, how to use even television sets, how to use the internet, amongst others. And those are the basic tools of globalization. What happens as a result? Digital harm is a reality. Any young person who has access to these tools without enough knowledge on how to use it goes about using it for scamming, for impersonation, for propagating hate speech, for propagating sexual related stuff, for just pleasurable activities, failing to research, failing to educate himself, failing to maybe sensitize others on harmful practices, and our budget ends up on running costs, nothing such as investment. Why? Because of the quality of education we received. It's really challenging. We train more of job seekers than job creators. We have a teacher-centered learning of approach instead of learner-centered. And so as a result, when teachers are not formally trained correctly, when some are not within their calling, when they are not passionate enough, when they are not available, learning stops, which ought not to be so. Thirdly, we have hurriedly gone for free education, and we are unable to provide the basic instructional needs of teachers and learners to make this learning interesting, educative, sustainable, relevant, amongst others. So a secondary school teacher or principal who knows what they need in a classroom, let's say a projector, a laptop, lighting system, maybe access to internet, knows that all of that is necessary but cannot provide it because there is no means. So we remain within a form of education that is neither helping us, neither helping the government, neither helping the West. It's a sham in a summary. And I think that people need to start talking so that we can challenge the current status quo and we can work for alternative education or better improved curriculums that will help Cameroon move forward. On what our education should look like, we need to develop an educational system whereby from childhood, that's from the day you are born as a child and you start reasoning, you can already look for a feel of passion. You can concentrate on building up that passion, and you can concentrate on learning or building competencies on that. What I'm saying is that specialization needs to start from primary school. If you look at what Japan is doing, what India is doing currently to emerge very fast, what the US is doing is that they are promoting specialization at earlier stages. And what happens? You learn very fast. They are promoting aspects of critical thinking and they are providing enough resources such that apart from specializing, you can as well learn other fields on your own. So you become balanced in society. That's what I think. The third is we need to return back to our culture. We are almost losing our culture completely. Our fonts are now politicians. Our chiefs are now members of House of Chiefs. And they are doing very little to safeguard the culture we had. And true development, true growth only comes with innovation. Innovation is most inspired by culture, traditional practices of the past. Why? Because our customs and our traditions were based on the immediate resources around our environment. However, what we are adopting from the West reflects what also was available around their environment. So if we just borrow and copy to paste, it will not go. But if we start asking ourselves that with the bamboo we have, let's say in the Northwest region, or with the abundance of corn, what can we do with this corn? How can we run research to develop this? How can we make it become unique from what the rest of the world is offering? How can we add value? then how can we sell such that we can improve the gross national product of Cameroon? That would be making more sense, right? It applies in many other spaces. So if I was to be in a decision-making process, or I was to contribute, I think that we need to, first of all, ask Cameroonians the kind of education they want. We need to also project the future of Cameroon, the kind of challenges Cameroon can face in the next 10 years, 20 years, 100 years. And then we need to see how we can tackle all of these problems in the kind of curriculum we will develop for Cameroonians. Thirdly, we need to bring back payment for education and promote rather access to scholarships, access to alternative education, aspects of orientation, professionalization, to be able to make a change. And we need to stop the aspect of privatizing our industries such that Cameroonians can be professionally trained at standard level. Access to INEO, to maybe Susukam, maybe to Alukam should not be based on connections, but it should be the basic fundamental rights of all Cameroonian youths interested in those fields. And to summarize, we need to promote aspects of specialization also in terms of geographical location. For instance, if the East region has more of timber, industries, state-owned industries that promote processing of timber into semi-finished and finished products could be created more there, such that if you are in Cameroon and you're interested in woodwork, of course, the East region can be a reference point. If the North produces cotton, they can concentrate in cotton and it could be a reference point. If the Northwest is producing a lot of corn, a lot of maybe corn beer, a lot of maybe cocoyam, they could concentrate, come up with industries and so on, such that we can develop those sectors. It will be our identity, it will be our innovation, it will be our contribution to the gross national product and to the world economy that will in return improve our status, make us economically more stable, economically more viable, more valuable, and of course will take us to the path of development. If the Southwest produces cocoa industry should be there. They produce fuel. We need fuel companies owned by the state, so that it's not all about connection, tribalism, but it's about all of us Cameroonians protecting what we have and making or building more value on them to contribute our own quota in making Cameroon greater, better, and a better place to be. In a summary, we have just one country, Cameroon. We have the responsibility to protect it. We have the responsibility to contribute our quota, because we will die someday, but we have unborn generations who need to benefit from it. The conversation can be ongoing, the activism can be ongoing, and I think that we all can contribute our own quota in building up the educational system and making it better than what it is. In a summary, that's the brief presentation I had for us this evening. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Louis, for that powerful presentation. Of everything you said, really.
The objective of the government at some point in time can influence the quality of education they provide for citizens. When President Amadou Ahidjo became president, he was trying to stabilize a disintegrated country. While when President Paul Biya came up with the New Deal government, he was talking more about vigorization, moralization, and it's clear his main objective was to have a stronger grip on power. And so basic aspects of education that can incite violence, can promote maybe critical thinking, because critical thinking is actually the main virtue or value that makes people ask themselves, why should, let's say, young people remain unemployed? Why should the price of fuel keep increasing? Why should the price of basic commodities keep increasing? Why should all state enterprises be privatized? Why should, when youths are trained to ask such questions right from their minds, it will play in their day-to-day activities, which will in return reduce their mandate in power. That's very, very clear. So any aspect that would promote inciting violence or could reduce their stay in power was hidden from the people. And those who had the opportunity to travel out, study, and return to Cameroon were immediately given posts in government, ministerial positions, maybe delegates, and so on, so that they can keep quiet, keep silent, and then keep the people in bondage. Secondly, when a government has as objective to maintain grip in power, their main objective is to impoverish the people, to make sure that they remain poor. Why? Because when the people are rich, when they are financially viable in great majority, they can easily rely on themselves, so they can fight for their rights. So most of the challenges we are facing in the educational system had to do with the objective of the government. And unfortunately, the people themselves were ignorant. Let me quote, for instance, giving Cameroon free education does not help, because saying primary school education is free, but children cannot afford common books and so on, is worse than maybe deciding that every Cameroonian parent will have a minimum of 100,000 every month as minimum wage, and then they can pay, let's say, 50,000 for a secondary school student who will be able to get all the basic needs while learning in school. You get the differences. So the objective of the government affected our educational system, as well the indirect rule of former colonial masters, France and Britain. Because if we talk about the history that provoked the people, if we talk about aspects of development, Africa is the main source of natural resources. So it's clear, if we become technologically advanced such that we can process our natural resources in finished product, they will be in crisis in Europe. So they use both education, religion, and what again, and the aspect of colonization to keep us in captivity. That's just it. That's the raw truth. On what can be done, if we create enough awareness, if we maintain the discussion on safe spaces, if we advocate for what we really want, it's certain that President Paul Biya will one day lose power. It's certain that reforms will come in future. So we should be ready, we should be trained, and we should be informed enough to make the relevant contributions when we have those opportunities. That's why I would encourage every young person out there to go to school as much as possible. Forget about what Cameroon is offering a lot. Go for online training. Go for scholarship camps as much as you can. Study on your own. Research. The knowledge will help you, because the majority of what I am saying is not what I learned from the Cameroonian system of education. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Louis, for answering that question. I would love to ask if Mr. Samuel is satisfied with the answer. Hello, sir.
But I can't hear you, Lisa. Your voice is low.
Are you satisfied with the answer, sir?
Excuse me? Wait, I think it's good. We work on it. So it's good. I see your hand. I see your hand. Hands up.
I think Manuel
Hello, Lisa. Yeah, good evening. Hello, can you get me? Okay, sorry for coming in late, but from the little I heard from Luis, I have a couple of 3 questions to ask. Firstly, what are my worries are due to these challenges? What are the root causes of all these challenges that have been listed or difficulties faced by our educational system? Because firstly, I think, or I know, before solving the problem, we need to go back to our root causes. If we cannot tackle it from the root causes, then definitely we cannot have a solution to it. Secondly, what do you think, Luis? What do you think about these points that you have listed that could help for improvement, or maybe, improvement? Do you think these points do you think they are achievable? If they are they really realistic? Do you think they are really realistic, all these points you've listed towards growth or improvement of our educational systems? And lastly, what strategies, you did not talk about the strategies, what strategies do we use and who are those involved? How do we tackle this? How do we start? What do we put in place to make sure that, okay, these things actually are realistic? These actions, what actions do we take to make sure, okay, these things will be achieved at the end of the day?
Okay, thank you very much. What are the root causes of the inappropriate or challenges the educational system is facing currently in Cameroon? The first has to do with colonization. The fact that we were colonized caused us to receive just the system of education our colonial masters decided to choose to give us at the time. And the trained
this is July now, August, September,
to go a little bit further, religion itself, which came alongside colonization, is among the root causes of the poor educational system we have in Cameroon. The third root causes is the greed of our leaders. It's not just affecting Cameroon, but the entire Africa. Our leaders want to remain in power. They are not there for the well-being of their people, but they are first of all there for the well-being of themselves and their families. So instead of being democratic, being human-centered, being open to criticism and improvement, being open to promote values of peace, they are more interested in dictating how things go. That's the challenge. That's one of the root causes. The fourth is ignorance. Cameroonians are actually, in a great majority, ignorant of what they really need. And they say when when you are ignorant, it's a great challenge. That's why there is a need for awareness. We also have the poverty rate in Cameroon is also a difficulty. Since we do not know the value of work as Cameroonians, we are to a greater extent lazy, in quotes. Please, no one should be offended. We have not been able to live above the poverty level. It's a challenge. So as a result, anything offered to us is like our last option. On the
yes,
if the proposals I am making are possible, yes, they are 100% possible. As I speak, I am attending a program in India, a 7-month program, that what I am learning what I've learned for a period of 2 years is above what I can learn in an entire academic year in Cameroon. the shift of mind, the changes I've learned just for this short while. So I think that everything I said is possible. It just depends on the lack of on the willpower of the stakeholders involved. Maybe I quote a simple example. Do you know that malaria does not exist in most Western countries? What we have as mosquitoes in Cameroon is a joke. Where I am in India, we have very big mosquitoes, but they have successfully built up anti-malarial systems that make all mosquitoes that exist here unable to transfer malaria. And our African leaders are aware of this. That's something that they could simply work on and make, let's say, the Northwest malaria free. It's just about treating water bodies and so on with some medications. But because they prefer to remain on the a lot of subventions from the World Health Organizations and so on, and to be creating anti-malaria campaigns and chains, they prefer to keep things like that, keep the people under abject poverty, make them more vulnerable, and remain in power. That's how much greed we have as far as leadership is concerned. And on the strategies we can work on to improve on the current status quo, the first is awareness. If we know our rights, if we know what we need as Cameroonians, if everybody is aware, then we will know how to advocate in a non-violent way to get the right education on our doorsteps. I'm saying so because someday somebody will be a minister of education, different from the old generation now. I'm 100% sure that if I were to be in a decision-making process where it's a square peg in a square hole, I will play my role. But I wish many other young people become experts in their domains too, so that once they have that opportunity, they start creating the positive impact, and they can transform the society to reflect what we all want as a people. We also need to promote the aspect of a square peg in a square hole. Andre Mamafuda, for instance, our former Minister of Public Health, studied civil engineering from the Ministry of from Public Contract School in Yaoundé. So he was a civil engineer controlling the Ministry of Public Health. How we provide basic healthcare for all Cameroonians. Minister Paul Atanganji did not go to ENAM. He studied nothing about administration, but he's the one controlling our frontiers, the territory. Of course, we must have lapses. How are we not going to have a lot of security challenges? We have, let's say, the current Minister of Secondary Education, Professor Nalova Lyonga, has never taught secondary schools. She has been a professor throughout her life in higher education. She masters that terrain more. And bringing her down to secondary education poses some challenges too, since she has not had a one-on-one day-to-day experience with secondary education. She does not even master how a secondary school system functions. So she's bound to make some errors that are not voluntary. They are as a result of the ignorance too on her part. Same for many other sectors. So to be able to combat this, I think that we first of all need to get ourselves well trained in most of these fields in any way possible. We need to build up good moral standards and be certain that if we have the opportunity, we will make the expected difference. And then we also need to promote advocacy schemes, because in as much as we advocate, we need to stay alive. If we take placards to Yaoundé and say the educational system must be changed, most of us will keep that night or will be killed. But if we become well trained and we seek non-violent ways of advocating for our rights, then we'll get it. That is certain. Because what you ask for shall be given unto you. However, I really wish to emphasize that we need to stay alive no matter what we are doing. And together as a people, I think we can.
Okay, thank you, Luis.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. I see some two hands up. It's like Fred has a question. Fred, over to you. You have a question or a contribution? Hello, Fred.
Okay, are you getting me now? Okay, good evening to you, Lisa and Mr. Luis. I appreciate and I'm really thankful for this your presentation. It went a long way to at least open our minds, the situations and the lapses we have in our educational system. But actually, there's this thing that I want to find out because you've been talking about the state and you've been talking about those who are the students, let me put it that way, students and the pupils. And there's this intermediate party in it, that's the teachers. I never heard you mention that. So I want to find out because given the years, we have had several, let me say, leakages or videos coming out on the net about some characters of teachers that they carry out vis-a-vis their students. We also have like the incompetence of teachers. So I know actually that the quality of teachers we have in our school depends on how they are being trained. But also in our educational system, we notice that most teachers go into that job. Why? Because they actually want to have, let me put it, how do you call it in French? Okay, no, not even in French, a matricule, let me put it that way, where at the end of the month, they can go and withdraw something and take care of their family. Well, and given I was not there during the beginning of this seminar, so I didn't actually know if you presented yourself or not, but given the flyer, it's written that you are a high school teacher. So I think you have gained a lot of experience and you've actually studied your colleagues and you know their character. So I want to find out, is this aspect of incompetency in the incompetence of our teachers not also a factor to be noted down in these lapses we have in our educational system? And also you on a personal, let me put analysis, how can you note down, how can you react to the, that's, how can I put it? How can you react to the way your colleagues approach or the way they give out what they have been taught to the children in order to have a quality educational system? Let me put it that way. So that's my query.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll answer your question and then make a comment about previous concern too. About the quality of teachers we have in Cameroon, it's part of the remote courses. But then when you closely assess training of teachers in Cameroon, who does the training? Because from the beginning of our presentation, we made it very clear that we have three kinds of education we are talking about. We have formal education, we have informal education, and we have non-formal education. And schooling itself that we concentrated more on has to do with formal education, which is what the state itself has as responsibility to provide. Now, under normal circumstances, in other contexts elsewhere, teaching is a vocation. It's like a field of calling, whereby you go there when you are passionate, that you love it and you are ready to do the job. In Nigeria, for example, in the normal university, you have faculties of education that train experts in diversified fields on basic curriculum content and help them to become teachers. Now, when you are sure that it's truly your calling, you can choose to go and teach where you decide to, and you'll be employed maybe by the local government, maybe by the councils, maybe by the schools themselves. And in that case, we see a lot of improvement. Unfortunately, like you said, in the Cameroonian context, the teaching job is made to be seen like a goal, like it is a treasure, like it is the only stepping stone through which you can use to become somebody. And so what is the consequence? People pay millions into ENS, into NSET as of the past, not because they are passionate to become teachers. So when they become the government civil servants, they are trying to do more about what will profit them, not what will profit the learner. So in that, as far as that work is concerned, the government has a part of the blame, and the moral standards we have in Cameroon to have a portion of the blame. Religion itself we have, which is a tool for moralization, has a portion of the blame. It's not in all about blame game, but it's about the root causes. I think part of the root cause, the greater portion of the root causes comes from the state itself and her policies. Some of recent direct recruitment supporting the child is good. They are promoting non-formal education for that child, which is just awesome and wonderful. But you bear in mind with me that what the child is gaining has nothing to do with an official curriculum. It's just about promoting a skill, which is not enough in a society itself. The state, the government, has the sole responsibility to provide formal education for her citizens. So the quality of the curriculum and the policies in place dictate the quality of education the citizens get, and the outcome or the output it determines the success of that system of education. The long-term impact then are like the fruits. So when we talk about the government, we put some portion of root causes as from the government. It's not like we are just blaming them. Who is the government in general? It's all of us. And then to conclude, when we talk about colonization being part of our problem, it's not about blaming other countries. Let me quote, for instance, the technical subsystem of education in Cameroon. I went through it. We go through first and second cycle. We get CAP. CAP is in French when you studied in English. Why? Because of the influence of colonization from France. You get probatoire when you studied in English. That's the name of your certificate. You get baccalaureate. What is the consequence? You try to write public works, for instance, or polytechnic. Mostly people who studied maths and physics easily succeed, and they become qualified engineers with the certificates, no experience. While those who studied building construction throughout their life and ended at a level of back, could not continue in the university, have no opportunity to take these contracts. That is why, that's that common road. You need to travel back to France to get a technician. That's how colonialism is affecting the system of education. And there are many other ways that we can keep outlining for a long period of time. So I think it's not a blame game. It's analyzing the causes or the root causes as they are, and many others could be brought in from diverse angles. Thank you.
Fred, you still have something to say?
Yeah, I would have loved to actually. He hasn't actually answered my question. He has answered, but let me put it that way, because we all know, given his presentation, he has been talking about the state and actually pouring all the blames on him and on the state, sorry. And I understand that. Talking about teachers, I understand it's as a result of the failed system. Yes, because if it actually brought out a curriculum, as you said, and actually implemented its laws, everything would have gone perfectly. But now, I want to talk about the teaching milieu, that particular milieu, him personally as a teacher. What, because incompetence is something that when you actually do it, when you're incompetent in something, it's seen and it is known by all. And I believe even in the teaching milieu, even in their, among themselves, they know who is competent and who is incompetent. So at that moment, because the students here or the pupils here are the ones who suffer most because they don't get to have that they don't get to have that knowledge. Yes. So what, when they notice that giving their milieu or giving their unions, how do they themselves play the role of the teachers, of teachers to teach that incompetent teacher? Let me put it that way. I want to get it in that their milieu of activity. That's what I mean. Thank you.
Our teachers generally have different forums. They have professional forums, they have departmental forums, they have pedagogic forums. They assess themselves, they assess their weaknesses and try to improve. However, I also want to see this clearly. There are some teachers underperform because of the circumstances where they find themselves. I'll quote myself as an example. I went through the English subsystem of education. I studied in GTHS Bamenda there, in NSET Bambili, in GTC Bamenda, amongst others. And I was posted to go and teach in French in Figil up north. So you observe that my first 3 years of teaching effectively has not been creating required impact. Not because I cannot teach, not because I do not love teaching, but because of that particular circumstance. Now, there are many teachers within Cameroon facing different kinds of problems that I cannot even imagine. Some of those ones are aside. Teachers face a challenge of family attachment. In the Cameroonian context, you are from Bamenda, they take you up to the extreme north to go and teach, where maybe you are not with your family at all. And that itself causes maybe psychological challenges that reduces their output too. They also face the challenge of lack of instructional materials, because for you to teach well, you need to be motivated. And part of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation has to do with providence of instructional materials. In real sense, if I'm supposed to teach technology, I'm trained to teach, I need, let's say, computers in the classroom setting. I need access to internet. I need access to projectors, amongst others. But these are basics that are never there in our classrooms. And the way you are trained from ENS or NSET to teach and promote competence-based approach is not feasible on the field. That's some of the challenge the teachers are facing. So it's from several fronts. As well, we have teachers who are not passionate about what they are doing as far as teaching is concerned. It's another form of challenge. We have good teachers who meet learners who are very stubborn and unwilling to learn. It's another form of challenge. We have female learners, to be precise, who take a lot of passion in seducing their teachers than coming to school to learn. It's another form of challenge. So the challenges as a teacher is diverse, such that we need a particular situation or circumstance to be able to pass a judgment or propose a way forward. However, I think the conversation is ongoing in forums of teachers, in pedagogic seminars, and we can improve over time.